UK cinema history, This Happy Breed, 1944, directed by David Lean. Hello and welcome to UK cinema history, where today we will be talking about This Happy Breed from 1944, directed by David Lean, and based on a play by Nöel Coward. It's, of course, from the great quote from the character John of Gaunt from Shakespeare's Richard II, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves in the office of a wall or a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands. Hello, Kathy. Always good to see you. But let me just get our co-host Yassi in here, and we'll get this room started. And thank you for always being here, Kathy. We always appreciate you. There she is. Hello, Yassi. How are you this fine day?
Hello.
So I'm going to begin with a Nöel Coward song that was released about the same time, which I think if Nöel Coward is remembered for anything, he's remembered for all those witty little songs he wrote in E-flat that became Eric Idle fodder for Monty Python parodies. But the one that he came out with in 1944, "Don't Let's Be Beastly to the Germans," when we definitely got them on the run, let's treat them very kindly as we would a valued friend. We might send them out some bishops as a form of lease and land. Let's be sweet to them and day by day repeat to them the sterilization simply isn't done. Let's help the dirty swine again to occupy the Rhine again, but don't let's be beastly to the Hun. Of course he was being sarcastic, but an interesting note, because we won't have High Bender here today, and he likes to fill us in on the background and the making of these films. But an interesting note is that, of course, the film was originally written for Nöel Coward to repeat his stage performance that he created for himself, and that the part was originally offered to Robert Donat, who turned it down to play the Frank Gibbons role that Robert Newton plays in the film, because he said that final speech was exactly what got England into another war, which of course is to make Nöel Coward's point by completely missing it. Which I think this film does very, very well. But again, we won't have High Bender today. Now, if you're a fan of High, do not worry. He will be back next week, and as a matter of fact, is guest hosting an episode on one of his favorite films, the 1950 film Last Holiday, starring Alec Guinness, and that'll be at the same time, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, High Bender fans out there, you'll only have to go a week without him. I would also like to point out that Yassi has taken the trouble to get our back catalog of episodes up on to Apple Podcasts. So if you want to catch up on our old episodes, but still walk your dog or drive your car or go places and do things, those are now available to you both on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And I'm going to pin that link right now. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to ask Yassi, was this your first viewing of this Happy Breed, and what your opening thoughts on the film are?
Hey, I want to say hi to Kathy. She always been a great listener to us. And Abibo, welcome as a listener. I hope we won't be boring to you. And if you've seen the movie, you're very welcome to join us. Okay, so yeah, my first viewing of the film has a funny story because I watched it in Tehran in a place called Iran National Film House, and that place every Tuesday. Funny because right now in Philadelphia, I go watch movies every Tuesday, and that kind of remind me of that every week. That place used to show the classical movies, classical Hollywood movies, or classical international movies. And some of those movies, we used to call them the orange movies, because of technicolors and all the, when these, uh, how can I put it? Like, I can't, I think you can explain it way better than me, that when these movies get old and how, Victor Sjostrom has a funny saying about that. It says that the orange bleeds, the magenta color bleeds into other colors in Technicolor after a while, and he didn't like it. So what happened was that they had the original 35 millimeter of these movies to screen from the, before the Islamic Revolution era, from the Shah era. So they used the same 35 millimeter movies to show, and they turned orange because they didn't take care of them, and the passage of time made them look orange. So we used to call these movies, the orange movies, the technicolors. And of course I was really young, so I didn't know anything about all these things. And the thing is, when we were going to watch this Happy Breed, and it was my first watching, I thought that this is going to be another orange movie. But I think, again, Eric, you're going to explain why this specific Technicolor movie is not orange. And it wasn't orange. And what was really fascinating for me was this olive green color all over the film. And I found the sense of this green color very realistic. So let me put it right here that I didn't know how it was made. I didn't know how David Lean wanted. I mean, he used this, I can say, deemed colors, deemed palette of Technicolors to his style for his film. And how smart he did it to give this film a sense of realism that the movie needs. Because Hollywood Technicolors, those bright Technicolors, it's because of we all know today that they were mostly because of to give the audience the sense of escapism, this dreamlike aspect, like the Wizard of Oz, for example, the best example that we can give, or Meet Me in St. Louis, that was made also in 1944, similar to this movie. So
Or
what
last
what
week's when we were discussing Henry V.
Henry V, exactly. But Henry V also was a little bit deemed, not very Hollywood look. But why I told the story was that, first of all, how this movie didn't turn orange, it means that technically also the movie aged well. And when I was watching it for this room this time, it kind of gave me goosebumps. And I found that, look, this is, I mean, when everything comes together to make a great filmmaker, to make a movie, that stands to the test of time. That's what it really means. So that was my personal story with the film and the first time viewing and all this going around it.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Yassi. So yeah, for starters, this was David Lean's very first film that he made, directing by himself. He had co-directed with Nöel Coward, In Which We Serve, in which Nöel Coward played the captain of a ship. Based on what is his name? It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, and he'd also co-directed an adaptation of Major Barber. But this was his first film as a solo director, and one of the more interesting credits is the photography credit by a guy by the name of Ronald Neame, who would become David Lean's producer on his Dickens adaptations and my personal favorite David Lean film, Hobson's Choice, for an example. But he was working as the photographer on this film. And of course, David Lean began as an editor for the Powell and Pressburger film One of Our Aircraft Is Missing, is where he really got discovered and was recommended to Coward to do the technical side of directing, In Which We Serve. And what I think is so masterful about this film, besides the use of the contrasting use of the color to give you the kind of dingy inside of that house versus the bright outside and colorful outside world of England, is it is a masterclass in editing, and especially, and of course this is something that David Lean would specialize in, transitions between scenes. And so, we see this very early on when you see Frank Gibbons, the Robert Newton character, toasting with his old friend that he from the army, Bob Mitchell, played by the Ealing comedian Stanley Holloway, and it fades into the parade of people coming home from World War I, and you get the slow fade, and then it moves you into the story, and then you get that great transition, again transitioning out of the house to the big fair that they go through, and you see a shot that holds on one of those rides where they sit on a swing that spins around extremely fast, and the whole scene is actually projected through that from an overhead angle of that ride, while Frank and Ethel, his Ethel Gibbons, his wife, the Celia Johnson character, are discussing how they feel about their children, and it's these great transitions that make this not feel like an adapted screenplay. But the other thing that I think he does very well is Nöel Coward is very, very, I think, hard to perform, especially today, but even back then, because there is such a rhythm to his dialogue. And, this is something that Pinter would later pull upon in his plays and some of the screenplays that he wrote, and Tom Stoppard would most certainly be affected. The little word games, and that's how you get the typical design for living type couples, the way the words pass against them, and how personality comes out. And so you have Frank Gibbons as this person who very romantic in his speech, and then Ethel, you're just being silly, stop talking nonsense, and always constantly trying to undercut his eloquence. But I really always looked at this one, this Happy Breed, as kind of the third in an unofficial trilogy, beginning with Cavalcade, which was adapted into I think, but a great film, and Hollywood obviously did because they gave it Best Picture back in 1933, which took place between the Boer War and World War uh, One, which was about the upper class, and then In Which We Serve, which I think is still one of the great World War II movies ever, and that this is a third look because all three of them are looks at different kinds of families, and so you start in Cavalcade, which is about the rather upper class, upper crust. You move to the family lives of the people aboard the ship, the military families in which we serve, and then this, which takes place between the two wars, so between World War One and World War Two, is of a more working class background, and it's interesting because, of course, Lean decided that he didn't want Noël Coward to repeat the Frank Gibbon role. That he created on stage because Coward had just gotten too much of a reputation for being very upper class and upper crust. But Coward's real life background was very lower middle class. And uh, and so a lot of the experiences that the people are going through, such as living in a house with no indoor plumbing, and yet thinking that you've hit the lottery because you can live in such a big, nice house, and then of course 20 years later you're like, oh, this old dump, I can't wait to leave, and things like that. But I do also want to welcome Sila Blume to the stage, and welcome. It's always good to see you.
Sila!
Did you get a chance to see this, and was this your first viewing?
I'm sorry I was late, or I'm sorry I am late.
We're just glad to have you.
I well, I for some strange reason the last few Thursdays I've had to work, and so am I today. I'm at the shop right now, so I will be somewhat limited. I've seen the movie. Well, I just saw the movie yesterday, so it was my first viewing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The first thing I will mention is I found the idea to make a story in this way. It's nice, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you who are more experienced in film and in this film, because for me, this is one of those films, perhaps the first film, where I would say if I had not seen it, I would not be wanting to see it definitely because it's a nice story. I liked the character of Bill or Billy. I liked the father, his the way he was. This character I like very much. Uh, it was enjoyable to see this dynamic of her mother and his sister always going at each other, even though nobody could explain exactly why. And at some points, it just dwindled into just gossiping together. It was a strange, but it was funny. Um, so I didn't see anything with profound um, something profound within the film or something that had profound effect on me. And that's something that I cannot say about any of the other films except you know which one. Um,
It
and
starts with an O.
Yeah, and then it has a PP at some point. Yeah. Um, Somehow, I, when I think of the Kes, that was, and many others, it was such a moving experience. And this, for me, was just a nice story. I don't know why the director told the story this way. I accepted that he did it. The acting was good, but somehow I was left a little bit, okay. So we're going to show how they move into the house and how they leave the house, and that's going to be the story. So I don't know.
Understandable. I'm going to give a shout out, by the way, to our one Australian listener, Rob Coughlin, and he has said about this in the English kitchen sink drama films, or social realism, uh, 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 free cinema movement. See, Yassi, I corrected myself. That he said, Eric, you're just a sucker for these films, and he's right. I am. I absolutely am. If you've got a bunch of people sitting around a kitchen table in working class accents arguing, I'm going to I'm like, I'm all in. I'm just all about that I just love that type of filmmaking. But as far as was this a revolutionary use of cinema? I think it was, in terms of its editing and in terms of its cinematography. But I don't think, and this is something Yazzie and I were talking about, because we were kind of talking about the masks that people wear, and comparing, for instance, the public image of a Noël Coward, who was a repressed closet homosexual who had rather right-wing views, to someone like Truman Capote. And I said, I don't think that's a fair comparison, because I think Truman Capote is actually an intellectual. And while Noël Coward was a great entertainer, and this mask that he created of this cigarette smoking sophisticate in a bow tie and a dinner jacket, and whether we talk about his his Las Vegas review show, or that, oh, isn't it so nice? Yes, I'm Nöel Coward. Yes, yeah. or the little cameo appearances in films that he did, like Bunny Lake is Missing, or The Italian Job, or one, of course, that we discussed here, our man in Havana. He wasn't an intellectual, and that wasn't what he was about. Here's a man who composed hundreds and hundreds of songs, never learned how to read music, never learned how to write music, and wrote every single song in E flat without any accidentals. When it came to the accidentals, he would just speak those lines, and yet was at the time that In Which We Serve came out, England's top box office draw in the theater, and that year was English top box office draw in film. So yeah, no, this is, if you go into this as an intellectual exercise, you're going to have to look at the work of Neem as the photographer, and David Lean as a director, and in terms of the brilliance of the editing. But yeah, there's nothing revolutionary here. But to your other point, go ahead, Sila.
No, since you're going into that, I'll add something, because I really don't want to come here and to put the film down, which I don't think I'm trying to do. But I'm mentioning that because maybe I get some information from you to eliminate some of my perception, or to change it a little bit. Not that I'm looking for that, but I'm just open. I mean, that's the reason we discuss these films. But something that it's like one of the things that didn't really bother me, but I'm missing a little bit, is give me some signs that you have a certain concept, not just the one that you might praise, but for me as a simple viewer, if I can call myself that, something to show me that there's a concept that I will probably understand after I finish it, or 3 days later, when I suddenly realize, wait a minute, he was doing this and that, and I didn't see it at the beginning. So one thing that I found a little bit pushed, very quickly, let's get this over. There were too many little details going on that, to me, should have gotten some type of explanation. I'm sorry. I have to deal with my customers sometimes. So the bandaged head of the young boy, the son, he comes in, and as far as I remember, there is no indication as to what happened to him. Nobody's asking him what happened. Everybody's talking about the situation, but nobody knows what happened. We don't know if he got hit by a bullet, by a hammer, by a butterfly. We know nothing. And then he just goes up with a bandage, and we have no idea why is this bandage there. So that's one of the things that a couple of details that I found, they just threw them there, and I don't understand why they are there.
Well, actually, that's goes to what I think is the point of the film, which was that the Sam Ledbetter character had taken him to a protest, and he'd gotten a rock thrown at him during when the protest had turned violent, because when they were protesting for workers' rights, and it sets up the central theme of the second half of the film, which is the Robert Newton's Frank Gibbons character, con- uh, constant fight against modernity, one step at a time, and the kind of corruption of the Guy Vierney Sam Ledbetter character, who, when he marries Robert Newton's daughter, just kind of settles down and becomes just another middle class, and gets another house on the same row, and lives the exact same life as his parents, and the Gibbons, and raises children, and the ending, the last scene that you see him in, up until a brief scene towards the end, where he's questioning the aunt about her Christian Scientist belief, is he's basically being banished from the house for kind of putting their precious child in danger by the Ethel Gibbons, who is really the vocal spokesperson of this anti-modernity, you know. And to your point, to me, that was something that was very subtly worked in. That wasn't something where you do have a couple of times where there are speeches where literally Frank is giving a speech to someone. So, for instance, when he's talking about the peace movement in 1939, that allowed Germany to take over Czechoslovakia, and Neville Chamberlain, and appeasement. That's a direct speech, and that is something where Noël Coward is basically saying, England, you are turning your back on Czechoslovakia. That was literally hit a version of his song "Don't Be Let's Don't Be Beastly to the Germans," put into speech. But the main theme, this idea of accepting middle class Brittendom as being good in itself, of not exceeding your grasp too far, that England has to move slowly towards these things, is much more subtly done. Yazzie, you had a point.
Yeah, I wanted to say, look, Sila, on the back channel, actually, today, just today, I told Eric that I have more to complain about this movie, and I'm going to begin the room by saying that this is not one of our best watches. But then, it like, especially like, I don't know what happened today. All these things like come to me, things that I'm telling to you right now, just come to me today when I was reflecting on the film. I thought that specifically the way that the story is telling at this certain period of time historically, between two wars, you know, the appreciation of peace that is within this the soul of this film. I found it really beautiful and fascinating, and how the political and historical events, wars, the political decisions, of people that we go and vote, how can they Im- Im- impact and have, radical effect on middle class and working class and normal people's life, on teenagers, like coming to age people. The way that it shows us a norm. I told Eric like just 30 minutes ago that I was just rewatching a few scenes and I thought to myself why he chose to show us funeral of King George V, but he doesn't show us the funeral of Phyllis, and Reg. Why
Yes,
he doesn't
yes.
show us the funeral of Nora, the mother. And I thought because he wants to tell us sometimes, especially between two wars, that they didn't matter. The working class people, these people, they didn't matter. So,
And let's look at the Queenie. Oh, go ahead, Sila.
No, I just want to say thank you for that input because I noticed that, uh, but I think it's worth reminding me that that could get more importance that I was giving it a little bit superficially myself. But that was a point that I noticed from the first third of the movie. I was looking at it and I was saying to myself, so wait a minute. So they, and then little by little, I started realizing we are looking at a peaceful, and that is done very clearly by at least two dialogues when the different couples doing it. The first ones I think are Ethel and him, where one says, "There's a war. th- We will never see war again," and the other one says, or the other way around. But it's these conversations keep taking place where we're saying, "There, that was it. We will be peaceful now," and the other one says, "Oh no, it's going." So the commentation of the commentary of where we are now, and we have finished with war, and we are now at home is constantly put into debate. We are peaceful now, and the other one says, "Yeah, it might be coming again because as long as you men go to war, there will be war," and there's all kinds of comments going back and forth. So, this elevation of the peaceful period, even though peace was not really there because they had their own things going on, but this focus on the peace that happens in just 2 decades between the first one and the second one. Yeah, I could accept that as a focus of what he was trying to say.
And
you know,
let's
and
go ahead.
oh, sorry. One more thing, and it's that this emphasis on peace I really liked, like the importance of family bond, the sense of community. This, like, we see at the beginning that the parade, and as Eric mentioned, I found also the script, Noel Coward's play, actually really hard to play and also hard to grasp. Like, there were moments that I was thinking that what did they just say? And I really like the very subtle comedy within the especially with Nora, with the grandmother, her jokes and everything, and this sense, the simple pleasures during the piece that we ignore. I think this movie is a great celebration of period of tranquility. What and the resilience of of people that go to war and come back and getting ignored by the, and it's also mentioned, Frank says it, like he says, yes, we went to war, we fought for things, but then the country, she forgot us, but we still love her because she's still, all these, I'm gonna go back to it and say that, comparing to the Caddenberry and Henry V and the cinematography aspect, that how visually it shows its respect for the country, that the patriotism in it. But I totally understand what you're saying about, you know, it sometimes we can't understand that why this style of filmmaking, why actors they perform this way. I think sometimes it gets a little bit more stagey than other times, but this reflection on the past and simple pleasures and the sense of community, even with the cat, with the weddings, with dance, and another scene that I'm going back to later on in the conversation, the jazz singer that they go and watch, the way that history is depicted in the film with, the changes of time, the changes of appearance of the actors, the way that they age, and the way that we grew. It's kind of like we grow with them, because as the film goes, like, advances, we understand these dialogues better. We get more familiar with them. I think it's also because historically it gets closer to our time, which is very smart of David Lean, that telling the story that way. Oh, and also it's because this family, we get so much familiar with them. We go to wedding with them, we go to funerals with them, that they grow on us. And we kind of love them, and we can't ignore people like them. I think that's the power of this film.
Well, and it reminds me of the other great interwar drama, the great novel, and they made a pretty good film of Remains of the Day, which of course is among more of the upper class. Um, but the class issue. Let's talk a little bit about Queenie and Billy. Now, John Mills played Billy Mitchell, who's supposed to be 22. John Mills was in his 30s. He looked like he was in his 50s. uh, you know, and so on. That's unfortunate. But Queenie is someone who thinks that it's going to be beneath her to marry a sailor. That because she's gotten these ideas from working at the shop about what the excitement of real life is out there, this whole idea of settling down for a middle class house in a house with no plumbing, you know, in this row. And I've been to Chapman and actually visited the actual house that they filmed this at. It has indoor plumbing now, but it's a tiny little shack, and the fact that a family of 8 people lived in it is just amazing. And this is just not good enough for her. But then when she, of course, gets out into the real world and gets kind of maltreated, and she's breaking all of those little middle class moralities. She leaves with a married man who abandons his wife and children for him, only to go back to his wife, and she's basically forced back into the fold, marries Billy, and and in the end, she goes off with Billy when he gets stationed in Singapore, and the Gibbons gets left taking care of their grandbaby and just and waving her goodbye. Now let's look at the films that I love so much of the English kitchen sink drama era in the late 1950s and the early 1960s. And there, of course, Queenie would become a much more sympathetic character. We would be rooting for Queenie to break out the way we rooted for Kess, the way that we root for Arthur in Saturday night and Sunday morning. And Queenie is verbalizing everything that John Osborne's angry young man does in Look Back in Anger, and Archie Rice in The Entertainer against that whole middle class, morality. But this is not that era. This is 15 to 20 years earlier. Well, 20, because this was really written in 1939, and England, of course, is not ready for us to sympathize with Queenie. But I'm watching this from 2024, and with the experience of the kitchen sink dramas under me, and I am rooting for Queenie all the way through this. Like, why the fuck does she have to marry this guy who looks 20 years older than he actually is in a sailor outfit, and settle for what Arthur in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning said? Your TV and your pack of fags and having nothing between your ears. But Coward is giving us a different morality because, of course, he was born in 1899, so he's from a different, literally 2 different centuries from us. And and he's trying to teach us that it's okay to be a middle class person. It's okay to marry the sailor. It's okay to to live the same lives that your parents have. Move slow, and it is, to our ears now, almost disturbingly retrograde in terms of its anti-modernity. But it is a and this is the disagreement I always have with High when he starts talking about how, in modern terms, these people would be MAGA supporters. But it isn't it fascinating to look at how people approached the fearfulness of modernity at the time, and apply that to the same kind of fears that we have of things like artificial intelligence to this day, and Chat GPT taking over. I did want to take a moment to welcome Amir to the stage, and he's made some very good remarks in the comment. Well, welcome, Amir, and could you just kind of give us a quick overview of your thoughts on this happy breed?
Well, I just mentioned in the chat. I'm sort of new to this discussion, and well, I think I've seen this movie years ago, maybe when I was a teenager. So I have a very vague memory of it, and it was not really played with a good quality. Maybe I have to watch it again. Um, yeah, so that's why I said I probably should maintain my silence.
No, we appreciate you coming to the stage and not be remembering the film, or even if you hadn't seen the film, feel free to ask questions. Because we like this to be as interactive as possible. Uh, yeah, and don't worry about catching up with with our podcast, because every episode is a brand new season as far as I'm concerned, because we discuss a different movie every time. Uh, but we definitely just appreciate you being here, and anything you want to input, you can. I did want to, when we were talking about um, uh, the observations about class, and you had mentioned class, that it is interesting that when you compare this to something like Cavalcade, which is so very much selling the world on the English upper class, that a mere 15 years, or well, 10 years later, Noel Coward is using the same talent that he did to create the world of Cavalcade to sell the world on the English working class and the English middle class. And he's given these characters the same kind of dialogue, in terms of its wit, and in terms of in terms of its meaningfulness, that he did those upper class characters. And so when we talk about the kitchen sink dramas later, that is something that I think they owe a lot to Coward to. And of course, John Osborne and Noel Coward famously had a very brief argument where Noel Coward went on television and started talking about these unsophisticated playwrights like Osborne, who can't even pronounce their H's, and Osborne wrote him a well thought out letter saying, "Listen, no, we're in the exact same business, and there's room for the both of us. Why do you have to bash what I do?" It doesn't make because it doesn't affect anything that you do. And Noel wrote him back, and to his credit, said, "You're absolutely correct. That was completely wrong of me." And when Osborne actually formed a friendship with Coward after that, and considered Coward as almost a mentor when he went on to write the Entertainer for Laurence Olivier, who of course was one of Coward's discoveries back in when Olivier was in Design for Living on the stage. But I don't think you would have those plays without Coward, because and I've done the research. I can't find anyone who gave the kind of eloquence to the working class that Coward did here anywhere in either English literature, English drama, or in English film in the 1940s. There was a gruffness about anyone who wasn't of a certain class. And to Sila's point, that to me is what made this film historically important and also aesthetically important.
Just out of curiosity, um, well, back then in 1944, I think it's midst of war, maybe a year before the war ended, right?
Yes, yeah, but that
So, was this movie played in the US? Was it,
not till
I mean, introduced
1947.
to,
It didn't come out in the U.S. until 1947, but it was
r-
the number two film in the
right?
box office in England in 1944.
Wait,
And the class distinction amongst Americans, was it clear like to everyone, or I mean, was it just like a bit of a I mean, just cross the Atlantics, like you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Was it was
Noel
it clear to
Coward was
everyone?
a phenomenon in America.
Yeah.
and and especially his plays like Hay Fever and Design for Living were stalwarts on Broadway, and of course, and I mentioned before, Cavalcade, what won Best Picture when they adapted it in 1933, and and if anything, Coward was probably even more famous in the States at that point than he was in England, and I mean, that's all he was writing about was class. And so,
wait,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
a
they knew
question. I
about
have
it.
a question. So Celia Johnson won the Oscar in 44 or in 47?
47.
She Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it gets so confusing with the years. For instance, when we were discussing Henry V, it was the very first English film nominated for Best Picture. Even though the film came out in 44, it wasn't nominated until 1946 because that's when it came out in the United States. So, yeah, it gets very confusing with that, which is, which is why usually High takes care of all of that, because he's much better with the dates and the making of and the backgrounds than I am.
And the other question, maybe it's not really related to this movie. Am I allowed to bring it up here, or maybe I ask later? Um, yeah, how'd you draw the line when it comes to production back in the 40s and 30s between the American and the UK production? Like, is it by the company? Because when you look at the timeline, I mean, I'm not really an expert, but from my memory, many English directors moved to Hollywood. Or how do you draw this line? Say it's a UK cinema. Is it all about the identity? I mean, I don't know. This Greek guy recently made this movie called The Favorite. We call it an English movie because it's all about like British monarchy and all that. And we have production. Like, I don't know, a Man for All Season. Do you call it an American movie or the UK movie? How do you draw this line? How do you say it's an American movie or a UK movie?
We don't. We just anything we like that has anybody British in it, we just call that UK cinema and go with it.
Oh, that's right. So
We don't draw any lines.
yeah.
But you're right. It is, and but now this didn't have any American money in it, and neither did Henry V. But those were both exclusively English productions. But a lot of English productions, um, the Powell and Pressburger films, such as A Canterbury Tale, had a lot of American money in them. And as you pointed out, as opposed to wanting to hang out on a rainy little island where you've got 9 months of winter and have trouble getting enough money to finance your next feature, a lot of them, like Alfred Hitchcock said, sunny California, where you can have larger budgets and produce more films. Yes, please, thank you. Sign me up. And even some of the stalwarts of British cinema, like Tony Richardson, who did all of the great kitchen sink dramas like Look Back in Anger. Well, I don't consider that a great film, but The Entertainer and Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner and Taste of Honey, ended up moving to Hollywood and doing films like The Border with Jack Nicholson, and he actually ended up spending the last 30 years of his life in Hollywood, which meant he spent more of his life in Hollywood than he had in England. So yeah, you're correct.
But we should appreciate all the effort that they made for making these movies during war in UK. I think that's what I found really fascinating. The effort, what they pull off during a
Yeah, that's right.
world war.
Yeah, just imagine half the population of London they were eating horse meat during the war and didn't know, let alone making a movie.
Well, and
Exactly.
that row of houses where they filmed it at was 2 blocks over from a row that had been completely bombed out during the Blitz.
You know, like Olivier, he could, like, they could make Pride and Prejudice, for example. In UK, it was a British production, but because of the war, they moved it to America. But then he came back to make Henry V in UK, and I think Henry V, it's so
Which he
much better
ended up having to
picture.
film Agincourt in Ireland because the air raids kept coming over and ruining his shots.
See, but doesn't it give the movie, the production of the film, a certain value for us today looking at it? You know, the way that the British film industry played this crucial role in boosting morals and fostering the sense of, national, I don't want to use this word, but national unity during the war
I think you
using
mean
the
morale as opposed to morals.
yeah, morals, exactly. Like, this, I think this and portraying this British families, what right now you call it, I don't know, it's not British sink, but kitchen sink, but I know that what you're trying to say with, like, the similarity between this movies and British sink. But going back to Sila, now that I bring my conversation to British sink, I was telling Eric today that how I found this interesting, that British have this power to make uh the movies that are made during 40s and uh 30s and 40s and a little bit at the early 50s, this sense that I just mentioned, this sense of patriotism, the motherland, Britain, like God save the Queen, God save the King. But then we go to 60s and 70s, and these people, like, when I was watching at the beginning of this film, I was looking at Sam and the way that he was talking at that, like, the Christmas party. I said, oh, okay, look at him. Oh, there he is. He's our Ken Loach. Like, yeah, he changes like, it changes during the movie, and we can discuss about it, that why the movie portrayed him like that. But I was thinking that how the movies got dark, this beauty, this sense of family, everything that, but then we go to 60s and 70s, and how dark the British cinema gets. And I was telling Eric that it feels like war cast its shadow, two world wars cast its shadow on the industry, of cinema industry, and all these beautiful, colorful, technicolor movies gets into these dark working class and the criticism of everything of the world around them. And I think this is very fascinating to a very good study in British film history.
Yeah, and the comedies even get darker with the Ealing comedies, and then next week we're going to be dealing with High's guest hosting an episode on the 1950 film the Last Holiday, and how dark that film gets. But the Ealing comedies, become very very dark when you look at things like Whiskey Galore or Passport to Pimlico or The Man in the White Suit, and which which all in the 1930s it was all sing as we go and gray skies are going to clear up, and and by 1952 it's the lady killers.
But everything here in this film. So can I just start talking about the beginning of the film that I said I'm going to talk about, because it reminded me of when the movie started. I said, "Oh, look, we just watched it in the similar scene in Henry V. It was in Canterbury. This, you know, the this panoramic shot of London. This to the appreciation of the
Well,
landscapes.
it was Kent. It was Kent in Canterbury Tale, but yes,
Yeah,
similar type,
the
similar type shot
UK,
though.
the UK, yeah, the UK, and the camera pans. But I really liked the way that the movie welcomes us to the life of this family. And Eric, you're supposed to talk about the location more, because I thought that the location. I told you, I think it's the importance of the location is the similar importance of the Bauhaus that we see in German movies. But Sila can like talk about that part more. Uh, this camera pans across the cityscapes, and it gradually zooms in to this house through that window. You know, I think the symbolism in the cinematography, the transition from the landscape to the microcosm of a family life of a house. That's beautiful technique for the first time. David Lean, filmmaker. And when I was watching it, I was thinking that, you know I told you, Sila, I was thinking, why, like, when we know David Lean for this epic filmmaker like Lawrence of Arabia. So, but, then I said it just came to me today that, oh, okay, there it is. The ambition of that epic filmmaker is right here, are in these zoom in, zoom out, and as Eric said, the editing, these transitions from the streets to indoors, and the close-ups of the way that the transition of time, the passage of time. We never see it's been written like 20 years later, 30 years later, no cards in the middle. How beautifully he depicts this passage of time in the faces, in the close-ups, and he uses the historic facts within the movie through the strikes, everything, using the newspapers. And when we see like Martin Scorsese talks about David Lean with such appreciation, because he does the same thing in his movies. Like, we see the same way that he talks about the historic facts in the Killers of the Flower Moon. And which is also mainly focuses on the love life between the two main characters. And but he gives us facts, historic facts, with newspapers, with photos, with close-ups. That's why Lily Gladstone's acting was so important on that film. The same way that Ethel Celia's acting in this movie, Celia Johnson's acting, her close-ups, her anger, her aging, you know, we see the transition of time, we see the passage of time, and yeah, that's the David Lean.
But she
That's
doesn't change.
her eyes does.
And that's the most interesting thing. She that heart tugging scene when Queenie returns to her and she's resentfully giving her that hug, but you can see she's just all tied up inside, and all she's saying is, "Look what you've done to me," and but she's physically acting out her love for her daughter and her joy in seeing her daughter, but she can't bring herself to say it. The fact that she has to undercut any compliment she gets with, "Oh, you stop talking nonsense," and all of that. And she's a very well drawn character, just as Queenie is a very well drawn character.
But look, Eric, you're forcing me to talk about the portrayal of women characters, which I'm trying so hard to avoid because I want to focus on the positive aspects of the film.
Well, no, let's talk a little bit about the because of course Coward had a very shall we say old fashioned view of things, and yeah, no, Queenie is a perfect example. Don't break out of your middle class existence. Yeah, and here's a perfect example. Queenie, of course, was portrayed by a wonderful actor, Kay Walsh, who was Mrs. David Lean at the time. And of course, we're supposed to judge her for running away with a married man and getting him to abandon his wife and children. And 3 years later, David Lean would abandon his wife and children, who was Kay Walsh, who was playing Queenie. So physician, heal thyself. But of course that's a different class because David Lean was a bit more educated class. But Noel Coward was not. He had the equivalent of an eighth grade education. And what I found very interesting and never really gets talked about when it came down to that fight, that small fight between uh, Coward and John Osborne, is John Osborne was a classically educated man. And so when Noel Coward was going on television talking about how he, these modern playwrights like John Osborne can't even pronounce their damn H's, and what have you, he was it was actually someone who came out of the lower middle class insulting insulting somebody of the upper middle class for being too base and too low. And so that's why I call that say what when it comes to looking at Coward and looking at Coward's point of view, you have to view everything as Noel Coward wearing a mask. He wore a mask 24/7. This was a homosexual who was used to that whole idea of living two lives, and during a time when homosexuality was not just much more frowned upon, but actually illegal. When you look at Coward was at one point involved in a sting operation for supposedly what they call cottaging. Um, Alec Guinness had gotten arrested in a sting operation similarly, and Alec Guinness, all of this during the 1950s. But in the 1940s, what happened, during the lights out and in the bomb shelters, stayed in the bomb shelters. People did not care about, and there wasn't a need for Coward or any of these people to really cover up who they were and what they were doing. And so Coward could walk around and he would tell people, "I've tried everything from soups to nuts, and I ended up with men," in the most no Coward phrase possible. But then when he put that mask back on, and had to play the upper class, upper crust person, he is showing a family that came from a very similar background to himself, but he has to pretend like he is looking at it from a upper class point of view, which isn't his real point of view. And that I think adds another layer to the film.
So I have a question for Sila, and since Shangri is in the audience, I think, do you remember? And for everyone, do you remember the scene with the jazz singer in the movie? And Sila, if you're available to speak, uh, or anyone, can you tell us a little bit about the music of the film, and how did you? What was your take from the jazz singer scene, which is, I think, really interesting in this movie.
Well, as you already know, I'm not knowledgeable in jazz at all, so I cannot say much to that particular scene. I found an interesting take on the way they used to film, specifically at the end. The way I don't, it felt very odd, not in an uncomfortable way, but it felt very different because it was not used as background, but also not as foreground. But when we see them leaving the house and we know that that's how they started the movie, there's a lot of importance into the music as to also there's another scene which I think it was even more powerful in what I'm trying to talk about when she disappears, Ethel, and we just see the empty house after she had just heard that her son was killed, and we see the music keeps going, and it's not sad music. It's not. It's a little bit joyful. It's actually a little bit too joyful for the situation, and that's what I found very interesting. This contrast, and for that reason, it gained a different level of importance in the perception of the film. And then you see how slowly she comes out of the garden and he comes behind her and they're not speaking, so obviously she has already told him that their son has died in the car accident. So this moment, the way they used the music, I found that very, very interesting. And I think generally speaking, I would say that the music was used, yes, as background, but very intentionally and with a very particular attention to the type of music that's being played and the volume that is being used, which I don't know if this has to do with the reconstruction of the film or which is most likely not the same as it was, acoustically. But I found that very interesting. To the jazz aspect, I really cannot say enough. Definitely not as much as Chiang Mai might be able to say.
What Eric said before about this cultural transformation, this cultural text, this cultural context in the film, and changes, the cultural changes. I found that really interesting, the use of jazz singer, because we all know that jazz singer was the first, as they say, talkie movies in cinema that we know. So
Only 15 years before this film was made,
exactly,
which is
but
weird
so
to think
okay,
about.
exactly, and the joke that they made, that they say, "Oh, we don't understand the sound," which was a commentary of the sound wasn't still very well done in the movies, still something very new. I like that so much, but also that what
Oh,
you
see, now
said.
I took that scene totally differently. I thought they were talking about the American accents, that they were saying, I can't understand anything that they're saying either.
That was my understanding as well.
Oh, that's interesting. I found that, like,
Both takes
it
could
goes
be
to
correct.
this changes, the change. Yeah, yeah, very
And
interesting,
your
right?
take would go more towards the anti-modernity
Yes,
Noel Coward
yes.
theme.
And I think
Yes.
that might be a lot more the intention than what I perceived. I think it might have more to do with understanding the culture and not understanding the accent.
Yeah, it's over there and over there, and of course, because the words that are using are nonsense. But of course, it's also the most famous scene from the jazz singer, that introduction scene.
And right before that, the joke that they made with this with Sam character, that she said, "Oh, just because the movie is a talkie movie, the tickets are more expensive." And Sam says, "Oh yeah, but I can afford the ticket." And his wife says, "Oh, you capitalist," just because at the beginning of the movie he was like you know, so against capitalism, or like so talks so
Well, and
against the
to
queen.
me, that's the best transition of the film. Is his transformation from a socialist radical to a middle class father, you know, who his only sign of rebellion is questioning the aunt's reliance on Christian Science, and like thinking that somehow she could pray over a broken arm and heal herself. I think that's
Yes.
well done. A well done character arc.
Very well. And you see how beautiful it is to use cinema to, to emphasize on this cultural changes occurring, especially during the two wars, and and the effect of popular culture. The way that popular culture reflects and shapes the societal attitudes and values and everything.
Well, you mentioned before the term modernist, and I think that Queenie was exactly the playing that role against everybody else. When she's saying, "I don't want to marry you," I think it has to do with that in particular. She she is contemplating, in my view, this peaceful time where you're supposed to be normal, peaceful, in between wars. Well, after the war, because they didn't know the next one was coming. But this normality that she saw coming, because now there's no war, she didn't want to take part in that. She wanted to do things the way she, I don't know if she saw them elsewhere, but for some reason she was basically doing.
She works at a shop, and so she's
Okay.
dealing with a different class of people
Yeah.
than her family
Okay, so
and
that
neighbors.
well, we never see the shop, so I was not sure about how that influenced. They do mention the shop a lot of times towards the end, also. But and I thought that is what sets her apart from the rest of the cast. She does not want to accept this nice normality that now we are enjoying with tea and silly talks. She wants to do something else. Of course, I don't know if she has these thoughts before she meets the married man or after she meets him.
And I don't know either, but there's hints because of course in terms of her mother's relationship with her, and that she just wants to have a good time. Ethel is constantly on her, and one of my favorite scenes is when Frank basically gets Ethel to admit that she just never liked her own daughter, and because she may have just always been a free spirit, which is why 2024 Eric is rooting for Queenie the same way I rooted for those anti-heroes and all of those kitchen sink dramas, and the way and I would be rooting, and I'm rooting for Frank as well, the same way I rooted for Arthur's father in Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. I love both characters, and for the same reason, because they are complete and total anti-authoritarians in a way. Arthur's father, the only lesson he wants to teach his kid is you don't snitch people out to the cops. You know, And Frank is constantly railing against the new conservative governments throughout this film. And when you see a new government comes in, no, they're not going to last, and it's wonderful, and they're absolutely wonderful characters, but you're not rooting for them to succeed even today, because you know what happened afterwards. You know what happened. You see, the future that they don't. Whereas in 1944, you would be wanting Frank's character to succeed in getting his daughter to accept a middle class life as all that you're going to have, and that's good enough. Whereas of course by the 1960s, you're rooting for Queenie to break free, and maybe, that, gosh, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't you like to own your own tea room in France? What a wonderful idea that is, And she owns her own tea room in France, for God's sake, and that is something like, oh, what a horrible experience! I can't believe that happened. Wow, that's horrifying. We have to get her home. Oh, don't worry. She is home. I married her and saved her from a life of owning a tea house in France.
There's another connection that you reminded or made clear to me between Queenie and her mother in terms of her trying to break out either out of protest or out of being a visionary or in love with a married man, whatever comes first. But there's something that hit me badly towards the end. It had been building up, and I did not notice it until the end very clearly. And that is when, I mean, I think we know all that Frank, I think that was his name, the head of the family, he was always very romantic with his wife. He was always very nice, very generous, very warm, and she couldn't really take it. But I accepted that until the end of the movie, where he says what he would like to have, and this, what he would like to have in the future as something phenomenal, includes her. And she responds, "Oh, don't be so silly." I'm saying to myself, what the dude is wrong with you? So I think
Yeah,
that's part of
she can't handle emotions, just
correct.
like she couldn't when Queenie comes home.
Yes. So for
And
me,
all she is,
Queenie is
look what
doing,
you've done to me. Oh, look at all the trouble you've caused.
yeah,
She can't even say, I'm glad to see you, and I
yes.
love you, and I miss
So
my
in
daughter.
part, I think Queenie is revolting not out of protest, but because she doesn't agree with what's going on, and she sees, among other things, how her mother is not really happy, at least not showing it.
Well, and that there's some scenes where Coward shows very knowingly, and Yazzie talked about this in quite a few films, but the gay man's view of women, and Coward is very very good with this. For instance, when Frank comes home and Ethel's taking care of Queenie's baby, and Frank takes his boots off, and she says, "You're going to have to clean your own boots. I'm too busy taking care of the baby," and lists off 9 or 10 other things. And this is right before Bob is the Stanley Holloway character is about to move, and Bob comes over to get a drink. And the next thing you know, you see her; she's cleaning Frank's boots, the thing that she said she wouldn't do, and it's subtle. It's not a big deal. It's made of the scene. You don't even get like an eye roll or anything, but you're like, yeah, I mean, that's her put upon life. I mean, they do have a maid, which I guess is, puts them a little higher middle class. But yes, I mean, but this is a woman who not only raises 3 children, but does everything for all 3 of her children, who live well into adulthood in the same small home with her, and take care of all of their needs, plus take care of her sister-in-law, plus takes care of her mother-in-law, and no one else in the entire film is shown doing anything. not cooking, not cleaning dishes, not picking up, nothing. It is all Ethel. And so, yeah, of course, and of course, Queenie seeing that is probably going to say, yeah, that's probably not the life I want.
I'm gonna go back to Queenie, but can I say something here? Another thing that I found is used as this comedy relief, but also goes to all the themes that you are talking about right now. When Sila said about, you know, the Queenie's revolt, or the way that she doesn't want to be a domestic housewife, and how she's been criticized in the film for trying to be like a more modern female figure, is that I found the character of the cat, Percy the cat, you know, and the way that the cat symbolizes this domestic comfort, because cats, and how they're more comfort within the warmth of the family associated, within, the way that they're domesticated. Also, in contrast, they are more of the, free spirit. They go out, like they're more free than dogs regarding to pets. And also here in this film we see the cats like lounging around, going out, coming back, uses this comfort of the family, also going out, want to be adventurous, more associated with nature and the world outside this, family, this house that most of the time of the film is happening in. I thought the use of the cat character very interesting, very seamless, very subtle, but
And
also
it
very
ties
interesting.
and it ties the scenes together, because you have often Lean using the cat exiting the frame and entering the frame years later as a transition device as well.
Exactly, another visual, the the very well
Time has
use of
passed.
the
A way of showing
visuals
time has
to
passed.
passage of time.
And of course, the other one is the different modern devices that we see. So you mentioned the talking pictures. You also see Frank working on an early version of a crystal radio at one point, which becomes the wireless radio in the middle of their living room. And then you get the death of the king, and you get their first glimpse of an automobile during the wedding scene, and how modernity is coming to them, and that there's nothing that Frank or anyone can do about it. It also works as a transition device to keep us up to date as to how much time has passed within the 20 years of the film span.
Another thing that I find, again, I've talked about this too many times, how it is necessary to understand a larger picture to appreciate or to relate to a little one. When we watch The Right Story by David Lynch, I think you need to see that film in the context, or at least being aware of Blue Velvet and Eraserhead, so you can understand what David Lynch is leaving out. I did not know anything about this man, Dean. I didn't know, obviously, that he made Lawrence of Olivier. So when I'm watching this film, I'm not aware of where he's coming from and how he has enhanced or reduced what his signature actually is. And I just find that, not as a criticism, just I find that interesting how by understanding such an aspect, you can start reading the film in a quite different way.
Which yeah, that of course goes to tourism, and of course the films that he made after this. He made the four Noël Coward adaptations, because he also made Of Life's Spirit, and most famously Brief Encounter. which were both in black and white. But then he would do the famous Dickens adaptations, both with Alec Guinness, Great Expectations, and Oliver Twist, which are groundbreaking in their own, and we'll eventually do those films in here because they're very important. And then he did, I think, my favorite of his films, Hobson's Choice, with Charles Laughton having, I think, the best performance of his career, which goes back to the same themes. It's also based on a famous stage play from a similar era, but that goes back to the same themes but sets them a century earlier and but as this Happy Breed, which he made in the 1950s, and a very interesting double feature would be this was Hobson's Choice, to see in the decade in between the difference in not only Lean's technique, because of course he developed more as a filmmaker, but in how he's interpreting very similar material and what the audience expectations were for these types of characters different in 1944 versus 1954, and how much it changed in that small, one decade.
So can I go to the Sam character? I want to say something
Yes, you
because I
may.
think Amir finds it interesting. It's I was thinking that how Sam Gibbons is similar to Marius in Les Miserables, in the miserable in Victor Hugo's. The within the social context, the spirit of revolutionary, and how Marius as a young student in revolutionary France giving the same type of
Just real quick, you're
speeches.
talking about Sam Leadbiter, right? Leadbite, not Sam. He's
Oh,
Sam
sorry, sorry, sorry,
Leadbiter.
sorry, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
this-
he's not one of the Gibbons. You're talking about the boy, socialist boy.
yeah, exactly, the socialist boy. Don't you think that he was so similar? And but look, the way that uh what happens with Sam character, the way that he in this film, or in within the Coward's play, how in Coward's writing, how he gives in to this type, the family life, the commitment, the romantic relationship, and how it changes him. But in contrast with, if I want to find a similar character, with a revolutionary, a European revolutionary, like in France, like Marius in the Misa, like how his romantic relationship with Cosette, you know and I, I think that's, don't you think the similarity or the differences?
Well, there's a big similarity, which is, of course, that it was the consequences of his actions, because he got Reg hurt. Because Reg would never have gotten a head injury if Sam hadn't had taken him out to protest. And the consequence of his action was he was going to be banished from a family that he'd come to love, and he wouldn't be able to marry the woman that he loves because her mother actually says, "I never want to see you again," and so he is forced by those consequences, which is outside society pressing, the people throwing rocks at Reg to put down that revolution, are literally pressing against modernity. They don't want to see the future happen, and he has to tuck his tail between his legs and join in. But do you think he felt happy? He didn't seem like a happy character once he'd become middle class. He doesn't feel, uh, he's got that nice little blonde mustache when he's lecturing the ant, but he doesn't seem like he is, better for having sold out his ideals for middle class. He just simply uh, 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 he sees, I think there's something to be said about the fact that if society presses you out of your beliefs, that giving in isn't going to make you happy.
Oh, you're right, because also at the end, like getting to the end, he also uh he he kept that fiery aspect of his character, standing up to the auntie, saying that, oh, you're not gonna go to doctor. Like, what do you mean by, yeah, yeah.
Well, and it is interesting because, of course, the adaptation of the Christian Scientist beliefs was a very big part of the interwar period. There were a lot of these spiritualists, and that was just and if you talk to people who grew up in England during that time, or even in America during, everyone had an aunt who had turned to Christian Scientists and said that doctors were a waste of time and everything could be healed spiritually. I mean, uh, and of course it was something that we saw again in the 1970s, but I think that had more to do with either excessive drug use during the 1960s or lead in the water supply.
Yeah, going back to the lead in the water, or lead in the paint, or everything. Yeah, but what Emma was saying about this, how was the movie received among the American viewers? I really want that's very interesting. I really want to know how these social commentaries, or
It
the
was
symbols
received
of
very,
working
very well.
class.
Read Bosley Crowther's review, Dwight McDonald's review, um, James Agey's review. It was, and it did very well financially. But again, people were used to Noel Coward, and they were used to this kind of half wit, half drama. You know, and what seems kind of maybe uh, banal to us now was extraordinarily witty compared to compare this to the dialogue in something like Mrs. Miniver, which came out about the same time, or films like that. This, this was something completely different, and I think they did relate, and I think they did understand, probably even better than we do now, the English class system, because it was so much a part of art at the time, and because there was so much more coming out of the British Empire into America, art wise, that dealt with class than you're going to see in decades following.
Emma, you pointed out something really good in the chat. Can you say it right now?
Yeah, I was just going to say the Anglophone world, like England, like Brits and Americans, Australians, Irish, I think they're more culturally unified as opposed to this day and age. Um, I don't know. Is it a fair assumption or I might be wrong?
More than now, I would say. Definitely. But I think the big disagreement between the United States and America had occurred in the previous century when
The
uh,
independence
uh,
wars.
England looked at, yeah.
Yeah.
hmm And then the biggest just disagreement came when England needed help from America to pay off its war debt after World War II, and America said, we'll help you all that you need, but not to maintain an empire, you know. And and I think our interests and England's interests diverged at that point. And then when the empire started to dissolve, Australia was able to create its own consciousness. You know, India was able to create its own consciousness,
Uh,
and England just became this kind of tiny little island off the coast of Europe where it rains all the time and you have 9 months of winter.
yeah, put it this way. I'm not sure if I'm well, I might be wrong, but someone told me when they played Guy Ritchie's Snatch in the US, in some cinemas they had subtitles because Americans are not really able to pick up, that certain Cockney accent or the Irish accent. It was a little bit over the top for them. I'm not sure. You can correct me.
Even with subtitles, you can't understand a word Brad Pitt says in that fucking film.
Well,
I don't care. I don't care if you were born. I don't care if you were born downtown Birmingham and had two imported Cockney parents directly from London, which are the two accents that are used in that film, and had an Irish sheepdog that spoke English. There are parts of that film you're still not going to understand.
Yeah, that's right.
Subtitles aren't going to help. That is the dialogue is deliberately obscured that way, and it's almost a joke. I think it's done on purpose, especially when he imports all of those up north characters, and you got guys calling each other Lou and Duck all the time, you know.
Yeah, maybe I picked up the wrong example. It was, yeah, probably a bit
But we
overrated.
did talk about it with
Oh,
Cass.
not
We
not
did
not
talk
at
about
all.
we
We
did talk
talked it
about it
with
with Cass.
Cass. Exactly. Exactly. We talked about it about so many other movies. The same thing happened. They didn't get the accent, so it happened. I just said it at the beginning of the conversation. I had a few, like, I went back on a few dialogues in this movie also.
But this movie, they're basically using a transatlantic accent. You could see Katharine Hepburn just as easily playing this part, of Queenie as Kay Walsh, and Sila Johnson. You could easily put any of the actresses of the 1940s into that role, and it would sound almost virtually the same. It's a very transit. They don't make use of accents the way a Guy Ritchie film does, or a Ken Loach film does. It is really meant to appeal to the broadest base and they speak very slowly in this film, which is interesting because that is part of a successful performance of a Noël Coward play, because so much of the dialogue depends on pacing. There's a rhythm to it, and they speak in a rhythm, and it's the same way that the iambic pentameter works in Shakespeare, so that even though we don't really understand maybe what the words mean, we get the feeling of it. And that's the same way that this film, I think, is a lot easier to understand without subtitles than like a Cass, for instance, or
Yes.
something where
Yes.
that's much more naturalistic.
Can I just make a point here? I think the exposure to the British cinema in the 40s and 50s probably was way more than now, right? Speaking of all the
You'd be
materials being
correct.
produced in
Yes, you'd
America.
be correct. I'm sorry. Continue with your point. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm just going to say because the majority of the American population were more familiar with other English accents, apart from Americans. You know what I mean? Like, the majority, well, not, well, the
Well,
majority
they
of
hadn't all moved over here yet.
material.
They
Yeah,
were
it's
still
true.
in England. Charlie
That's
Chaplin
right.
had moved over here, but yeah, and Cary Grant, but most of them were still in England. It was only when the British film industry really took a big dump in the 1970s that they all ended up with their little bungalows in Hollywood, and you had John Gielgud winning his only Oscar for playing a fucking butler, as opposed to Richard II.
Yeah, very true. And the whole point is the level of exposure was probably higher than now.
Yeah, and there was also an angle, and I'm repeating a point that you made, but I think it's worth repeating in this context. There was an Anglophilia at that time that was really in after before the war, in that people in America wanted to kind of emulate the English in terms of especially on the east coast of the United States and their class system and these types of things that we didn't really have until public television brought all the British soap operas and things through things like Masterpiece Theater in the 1970s, Return to the United States, and of course where it was a very widely held artistic movement in America in the 30s and 40s. It was a very narrow group of Americans who watched those shows on PBS in the 1970s.
So can we now like talk about the blocking and a little bit more about the cinematography of David Lean? And because I said it when we were talking about again, I'm going back to Oppenheimer, and I said that I found so many like composition mistakes on that film, and but how David Lean in his like very first picture uses this group dynamics. I always look the way that a filmmaker uses the space and the movements within the frame, in the frame, and the dynamics between the characters, the way that they enter the frame, the way that they go out of the frame, the positions where he puts every character, how he, especially on before they go when they were waiting for the car, before they go to the wedding.
That's a
They're
great
sitting all,
example.
you see, they're all sitting together in the group on that, and someone's enters and someone's goes out in the frame, and how it's like, the rhythm that we see, the intimacy, the sense of intimacy created,
And it
with
doesn't
the with
feel
blocking.
like it comes from the stage. It feels cinematographic.
Exactly. It
Yes,
feels
yes.
excellent.
It doesn't. It for me, it was not logical that suddenly they're cramped, five, six adults in this little space just because they're waiting for a car. That didn't seem natural. There was some decision made either to say something or to provoke something, but it was not a natural sequence for me.
To me,
Really, because
it
that.
gives
Oh, go
me,
ahead.
sorry, it gave me this, this sense of, first of all, the zoom ins on the faces and then the zoom backs, and how it was very less cuts, mostly show them all together. Again, goes to that sense of the family, the community, and also this tension that the she was talking about death, and then after that scene, we so many death happens, from the historic king's death to the family death, with the scene that Sila says, the blocking on that scene, and the cinematography and the use of music
Well, and
on
and
that scene, the
it
just the
felt natural
position.
to me. It felt natural to me because I was thinking back to when I was a child and we were waiting for a trip to go somewhere or anywhere, you know, and how we would all just kind of bunch together, uh, waiting for, and the reason why is because you don't want to have everybody all in different parts of the house when it's time to go because they want to get single file, and we're in a hurry, and so everybody's just kind of okay, yeah, everybody's here, okay, head count, and but it also makes a point about the claustrophobia of this large family living in this very very small house, and it's shot perfectly. And I will of course want to mention the cinematography by Ronald Neame, who of course his first film was for Powell and Pressburger. One of our aircraft is missing, but he would of course go on to become David Lean's producer for films like Great Expectations and Oliver Twist. And he is, and this is I can't think of very many other credits like this. He is credited as cinematographer and also co-writer of the screenplay on this film, and he would become quite a director himself. For instance, he directed Alec Guinness in The Horse's Mouth.
So another scene I want to talk about. Okay, after the death, we that beautiful scene of the Sila said that we don't hear, that we don't see uh, uh the first reaction of uh uh Frank and Ethel when they hear the bad news, and we just see them coming in, you know, inside the frame, and zoom into their faces, and then you know, zoom back to the scene that they're sitting in the park, and again the zoom back.
It's not a zoom. They're physically moving the camera. The zoom lens hadn't been invented yet.
Oh yeah,
Sorry
yeah.
to
You keep saying
sorry to
this
be
to
a
me. No, 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 no,
pedant,
no. You said it also
but
for in the Canterbury. You're right. That technique was not like the pan out and the pan in. And again, we see that when, first of all, a lot of talking about the tea. I really like that. So they're sitting in the park talking about the tea. Like, let's go have tea. It's tea time. So they stand up and they start walking. Again, the camera walks with them. Reminded me so much of Henry V. I mentioned that on the room about Henry V, that how the camera moved with Henry V and stopped with him and walked. So what happens here? That the camera starts moving, you know, like panning to the left, and this, it's like it was choreographed. It was like the dance that the crowd that appeared surrounding them, you know, and then they walked to that man that the priest, I think, that he was talking about the war and what's going on in Germany, you know, and all that. This the way that the camera moved, that felt very natural to me, you know, very, you know, purposeful, but the rhythm and the pacing and everything that happened, that was, I found it, and
and
the
I love that we see
symbolism.
that instead of the wedding, because of course a more traditional film would have shown the wedding.
Of
You
course,
know, I
because
love
just
that
like the
that
funeral, that doesn't matter. The historical,
because those are
you
just
know,
middle
we
class
just want.
events.
Yes, these are the middle class. Like these people don't matter. Their life don't matter. What matters is the politics and the historical effects on their lives and the historical events.
Well, I'm going to start bringing this room to a close because, of course, we've gotten to that magic longer. We've talked longer than the film is moment, and I'm going to start with Sila, since Yassi just spoke, and kind of get your final thoughts on this happy breed. Sila, from our discussion, do you think any more of the film than you did before you came in?
Definitely. I was just thinking that exactly that right now. And that's in part the reason I alluded to the aspect of knowing or hearing, not knowing, but hearing that the same director did other things that were more bombastic, more monumental. And this film, which actually coincides with several films we have talked about, this very subtle working into a city or into a culture by seeing either the landscape or the architecture, in this case, a lot of architecture in this film. And in many scenes, you see the way this typical rows of houses that they all look the same. But even though they look the same, there's nothing special about them. But the fact that they are together and they are uniform makes them special. So it's like a very interesting duality between what is the view of a whole street as just a whole street, and what is the value of having been able to see the whole street. I thought that was that one of those shots from towards the middle of the film, I think it was. It was absolutely beautiful. Yassi spoke about Bauhaus before as a reference point, and I, I, I was very impressed with that, with those aspects of showing what this town is about, not just the family, but just as a town and where they belong to. So I definitely acquired a lot more layers to what the film is or what it's supposed to be than what I had when I finished watching it and came into this room. So all in all, thank you very much again for yet another. Oh, another thing that I wanted to mention, partly technical, partly more over that. In some places, it's from 47, and other places from 44, the year the film was made. I find very interesting, considering that when it was made, that they're addressing that topic of what happens with the family, with their sentiments, with their difficulties, with their peacefulness, when the people making the film know already that it's not going to be good. So I thought that was a very interesting aspect to the year they made the film.
That is an excellent point. That, but of course, Coward, when he wrote the play, did not. But you're correct. Yes, yes. Yazzie, your final thoughts on this happy breed?
Yeah, for the final thoughts, I'm just going with the ending scene again, the technical aspect. The way that the movie starts, it's like this sweeping aerial shot of London, establishing the setting and the sense and the scale, of give us this the world that we're entering and the way that the camera goes in the house that gives us the sense of privacy within the life of this family and the whole thing that we talked about the cultural change, the social commentary, introduce the that okay, we are where we are, the time that we are, and the beautiful sentence that it says the war has ended and now the houses are becoming homes again. And I think that it gives us this sense of security. We feel like, okay, the war has ended. We're we're safe now, But then I found these themes of social change, the impacts of war in, the national identities, or all this, the pride, or the way that the changes within women, uh, all that, and then we live with these people through 20 years of sword, and then the way that the camera goes at the end, it goes back to, and again we see that aerial shot, everything comes to, the narrative and the cinematography visually, everything comes to a full circle. I really like that I said about the colors at the beginning, how the use of the colors, this the saturated palette of technicolors played it. Yeah, it was, they couldn't make it the way that the Hollywood used the colors, but the way that it used here gave the movie the sense of realism, and all how the realism in the movie was had this sense of magic because of the magic of life. That was a very beautiful sense, and I think it was in within the final shot of the movie. It showed, it emphasizes you know the resilience of normal people, life, and all the things that they're going through between the historic event between the two wars, and how, again, I say it again because I think it's very important that we appreciate peace, and we know that how wars can destroy lives and how peace is important, and that's what was so beautifully done in this movie.
Thank you, Yazzie. So, scheduling note. So next week, High Bender will be guest hosting and take us through one of his favorite films, the 1950 The Last Holiday, starring Alec Guinness, which is a interesting look at the post-war period, because we did the three films celebrating 1944 in film. And then on Thursday, June 6th, we will be celebrating the 80th anniversary of D-Day with one of my all-time favorite World War II films, The Eagle Has Landed, from 1974, starring Michael Caine and Robert Duvall, Yassi's father's favorite film. And then we will follow it, but in between, we will be doing a redo of our episode on Caravaggio, just because we have the episode that we originally did up on um, uh, uh, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there was just a slew of technical difficulties. And it is a film I just think it deserves having an actual good recorded episode around. And so we're going to do it again. And then I'm going to delete that one and replace it with this one. And so everyone bring your A game for that. Otherwise, I'd like to thank Yassi and Sila for participating. Thank you also, Kathy. Thank you, Amir. And am I mispronouncing your name? But Changamir? Maybe? I don't know.
Yes, Shangimir, and I put it on the chat that Shangimir is also going to like Caravaggio, just like Sila, so much. So, yeah, so please, if you're interested to watching movies and come join us to talk with us, that movie is really worth watching. It's poetry.
Do we have to say exactly the same comments we made at
No,
the
brand
first
new episode.
song?
We're just
Okay.
pretending and we can acknowledge that we have done the episode before so if you want to say, like I said the last time, that is fine. It's just that there were so many technical difficulties with that, and I don't want it representing that film on now that we're up on podcasts, and replays. We're just redoing the episode from scratch. So yes, rewatch it and come back with a fresh review is what I would say would be the best way around it, Sila. Other than that, I thank everyone. Unless anybody has anything else, I'm going to close this room in 5, 4, 3.
Yes, we didn't say where the name of the movie comes from. Why the movie is called This Happy Breed.
You missed that. Yes, I did. I did that at the beginning.
Aww.
Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it again.
Say it again. So
This
say
Happy
it again.
Breed comes from Shakespeare's Richard the Second, and it, of course, is the dying plea of John of Gaunt, who came up quite a few times in both our conversations about Chimes at Midnight and as the father of Henry IV and Henry V. So we've talked about him quite a bit. But the famous line was, "This fortress, built by nature for herself, against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in a silver sea, which serves it as a official of wall, or as a moat to a defensive house against the envy of happier lands. This blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England." And on that note, I wish you all a great night, and I'm going to close the room in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good night, everybody.
Don't let's be beastly to the Germans. Now our victory is ultimately won. Let us treat them very kindly, as we would a valued friend. We might send them out some bishops as a form of lease and lend. Let's be sweet to them and day by day repeat to them that sterilization simply isn't done. Let's sweetly sympathize again and help the scum to rise again, but don't let's be beastly to the Hun.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.